Hi everyone, I'm Mirela Ciobanu, lead editor with the Paypers, and we are live here at the European Identity and Cloud Conference 2025 with Yves Mahler, president and founder of Venn Factory. And we are going to talk about a very new, interesting, intriguing topic, the digital estate. Yes. Hi Yves, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you as well.
How have the last few days been for you here at the conference?
Very stimulating intellectually. There's a lot that goes on here.
Yeah. And did you have the chance to talk about the digital estate so far at this event?
Yes, indeed. My co-chair, one of my two co-chairs of this Death in the Digital Estate group, and I presented yesterday, giving people an update on what's been going on over the last year because it's a new group.
Yeah, so actually I made a bit big of a small mistake. So it's Death in the Digital Estate. I told you that it's it's a new topic for me. So let's explain what actually it is.
Yeah. So it's a difficult subject. People don't like to talk about when somebody passes away.
Yeah.
But in addition to the financial assets that we know about, the financial estate, which is largely digital now, in addition to real estate, things that they might own physically, when people pass away, they now leave behind a lot of online accounts. They leave behind a lot of data. And so the digital estate represents all those assets that normally you interact with services online, but you can't when you've passed away, and the next of kin, your family, people who are looking after things, have to deal with the consequences. There's also the effects of, you may have heard of this phenomenon called grief bots or death bots.
Oh, yes.
This is a difficult subject as well.
But maybe also, you can explore to make sure that everyone understands exactly.
So this is a question about how your information gets used when you've passed away, to create a kind of AI chatbot of you, kind of representing you. And the question is, how much does it represent you? And how much does it represent your wishes or your wishes not to be turned into a bot? So these are some of the questions that we're left with when I'm told that in a few years there will be more dead people on the internet than alive people. So we need to face this challenge soon.
Yeah. And now I'm a bit curious. For example, you mentioned the digital trail. If you are to name just a few sources, general sources that, or not general, maybe some sources that people don't think about, that have this data about you and you didn't think about it. So let's say, somebody passes and I'm just thinking about their Facebook account and their bank account. But what other sources or traces are there that are not that obvious?
There are so many more, and some of them don't touch the world of identity and access management as I might know it. But the marketing systems of the world have a pretty precise profile of you. And it's possible to kind of reconstruct you from that much more detailed information than exists in a social account, because that's where you put data that you wanted the world to know. And your bank accounts are where you know that you have to manage valuable assets, whereas there's just a lot of information that comes out as what they call exhaust data as you travel about the internet. And you express preferences, or you click on something or don't click on something, hover over something with your mouse. That kind of information is available about you as well.
Okay. And now, narrowing down the discussion to the banks and financial institutions. How equipped are these institutions to handle all this data, especially if you think accounts, KYC data, identity credentials?
And it's really more than data because it represents actual financial value, of course. I would say that there's as wide a range of maturity in handling this as there is today around things like identity assurance and checking, doing KYC properly or doing authentication properly. Some of the things that we've talked about in the past, some of those mechanisms might be sophisticated if you're able to set up something like a legacy contact, as it's called, so somebody to look after things when you're gone, or it might not be very sophisticated and it's fully in the realm of having to have paper documentation that somebody who survives, somebody who's passed away, can go and get access to that information, to that account.
So to make sure I understand, at this point, banks have, obvious, probably they have some regulation rules how to handle this type of situation. And you mentioned this more like legacy contracts, and probably they are more like digitalized, and then you have the paper version.
Yes, much more paper and much more of the less sophisticated sort than of the more sophisticated sort. We do see examples in the social media companies, the very large online platforms, of ways to set up somebody to look after your account if for some reason you disappear for 12 months, say. Yeah. But those kinds of companies kind of live in the digital world. And I think, most of the larger banks have a tradition of, starting in the physical world. And still rely quite often on paper, which might mean a death certificate that somebody has to send in, has to be certified. They have to be certified as an actual relative, as maybe the executor of somebody's estate. So there's a lot of steps that are going to be required that are probably going to be handled not in the most efficient way, particularly when somebody is grieving, going through a difficult time.
But now I'm curious, in a way, it's not a happy place to be, but what about if the bank kind of asks you, what do you want to do in case something bad happens with your data? Could this be an option?
I think yes, for sure. And, they're not happy subjects, but we do have means to do that. We have that through wills. We have it through power of attorney. So by various means, we can declare what we want to have happen. And if we have that opportunity, my advice is to take that opportunity and have a conversation with your family about it and set forth the rules that you want to apply. Because if you don't set those forth, then somebody who's left behind has to deal with it. And the systems of the world, particularly of the banks of the world, may not make it easy for those people. Right?
Yeah, and I have this feeling that all these, wills, contracts, they are, like you mentioned, paper-based, but the tendency is to go digital.
Yes.
And then another tendency is all this compliance around the use of data.
Yes.
And then I have the feeling, going back to the papers, that you don't have these privacy things. I mean, you have the will, everyone from the family sees it, and
it's very public.
It's okay in a way.
And in fact, when somebody dies, most of the countries of the world treat that as public information. There's kind of a death registry, which is better or more poorly handled depending on the different jurisdictions. So finding out that somebody has passed away actually can be good to know, because you can start the processes, but can also present a vulnerability because there are bad actors who will go and try to do some identity theft in that circumstance where you're no longer in control.
But before we go to the bad actors, it's also this fact that paper gets a bit interoperable with digital. So the banks extract all this information in a digital form, but then they have the compliance rules that apply to digital, not to paper. But they handle using paper-based rules.
It is very confusing.
How can they play around this?
There aren't as many clear regulations around the handling of digital assets, apart from financial assets, as there are around the world of banking. Right. So what you find is that there are starting to be some guidelines. I'll give you an example from the United States, where there is a law that has been implemented in almost all of the states. It has the complicated name of the Revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act, RUFADA. And it doesn't mandate, but it sets forth a framework for understanding how you can pre-declare who you want to give access to. Maybe it's your attorney, maybe it's the executor of your estate, of your regular estate. But it doesn't have to be. It could be somebody different. So it treats digital assets as a different class of assets, which is a pretty sophisticated take. So we're starting to see some regulations around the world that handle this world of digital assets apart from the things we're used to.
Yeah, but we talk a lot about what banks should do, and then we also think for them to actually act in this sense should also mean an incentive. An incentive would be to stop fraud.
Yes, fraud and identity theft.
I'm curious, probably, that statistics around these types of fraud are quite scary, or the amounts of money lost are big.
Yes.
But first, let's see what are the risks, what types of fraud can occur from this type of situation.
The first and most significant is identity theft, as I was suggesting. by somebody who is, not a member of the family, who looks at the obituaries and finds out who's passed away and sees an opportunity. If they have something like a social security number, or they know they can find an email for the person, which is often used as a username in logging into accounts, they can start the process, not really surveilled by the family members who are in quite a lot of distress at that moment, and can steal money, can change the title of the house that you own, so that they now hold the title. There's a number of financial implications. There can be insurance fraud. So when somebody's passed away, they're no longer actively controlling all of those many accounts. And those accounts represent not just data, but value, very serious value.
So it seems that there is an incentive for banks to act on this.
Yes, yes, it is a class of fraud that is kind of a subset of the fraud that they know well and try to battle now.
But what can we do to solve some of the things related to the digital estate, death in the digital estate?
In the absence of really clear, consistent regulations around the world, because we're not there yet, the notion of a legacy contact, setting up a legacy contact, is a really useful pattern for banks to look at. Making sure that there's a way to pre-register who they should contact in the case that somebody passes away, and to have very clear identity verification mechanisms of that person. So that's kind of closing a little bit of a potential loophole in the process. It's something that, as I was mentioning, the social media companies, some of them actually do pretty well because they've been around long enough to experience when this happens. Some of the consequences we don't think about, we spend a lot of time thinking about multi-factor authentication for making sure that the right person is getting access to their own bank account. But if you think about the ways that we do multi-factor authentication, they may be more or less sophisticated as well. So sometimes the one-time password sent over text is still used. It's not a very strong second factor for authenticating who's in front of you at the moment. But when somebody has passed away and they are no longer using their phone, and the one-time password is going to that phone, what happens now? So there's a question mark around the multi-factor authentication mechanisms that many banks have been putting into place all these years. And so a mechanism of making sure you're reaching the right person, and that the device that the person you thought you were reaching is not now in somebody else's control, or if it is, it's somebody who has the right to figure out what should happen to the estate. Those are some of the difficult questions that we're asking in this Death in the Digital Estate group.
And you mentioned you had an encounter with the Death in the Digital Estate group. Can you give some hints on where the discussion went?
Yes. So right now it's a community group. It's not there to devise the technical solutions yet, although that we anticipate that will come.
I'm curious, is it US based or?
No, it's actually worldwide,
okay.
And the meetings that we have are designed to be friendly to all the time zones in the
nice.
world. So it's hosted at the OpenID Foundation, where the OpenID Connect work is being done. And the conversation is really quite interesting. So what we're doing is gathering situations where something went wrong, when somebody had a family member pass away. And of course it's all technologists at the table, so we're recording what happened, what went wrong, what would it be like if it went right. So we're collecting sort of evidence for how to make the solutions in the future be better.
And I'm curious because this is one of the biggest topics of life, and I have this feeling that culture is also important here, behavior.
Yes.
And you mentioned many technologists joining the group. Have you, I don't know, called for either psychologists, philosophers to join to give their opinion on this?
In fact, we have. And
nice.
Sometimes the technologists overlap with the philosophers.
Nice.
We have been in touch with, it turns out there's a specialty called thanatology, which is looking at circumstances around death. And so one of our co-chairs, Dean Sachs, who is our founding co-chair, reached out to a thanatologist who does research. He's been in touch with somebody who's written a book about what's called the digital afterlife. And we've taken up the subject of how do we have the proper language around having these conversations when it is so it's sensitive, it's emotionally sensitive, and it's culturally sensitive because there may be different preferences around the world for what should happen with all of this information about you and with your with your digital afterlife. If somebody wants to turn you into a bot, what if you're not okay with that? What if you are okay with that? What should happen?
Yeah, it's a very fascinating topic.
Indeed.
And I like this, so why I insisted asking more info about the group, because being at EIC, I have this feeling that, in order to progress discussions and having people with different backgrounds and with different experience, can improve processes and can steer more ideas. And indeed, this is a very sensitive topic, and having a group discussing about it, I think it's a very healthy layer for creating some standards framework around the digital
Indeed.
estate.
We're trying to be multidisciplinary, sensitive to a lot of cultural issues, and we're actually working on producing a white paper to come out at the same time as October's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And so we'll start to document some of the resources available and kind of the direction that our research is going. So people should look out for that.
Yeah. Though the topic wasn't, let's say,
it's not pleasant to talk about.
Exactly.
It was necessary, isn't it?
But it was, actually a pleasure talking with you, because all the time I get to learn many things and bring fresh perspectives to unpleasant topics.
Yes, well, it's always a pleasure speaking with you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Eve.